From Angola to Zimbabwe, dozens of sub-Saharan African states have been embroiled in violent conflict since 1980. All this while African Union and United Nations forces are there on the continent working to prevent that exact thing from happening. So why can't they do more? I talked about that and other issues with Adotei Akwei. He's the managing director for government relations at Amnesty International.
It's, I think we have a lot of different expectations of both the African Union and the United Nations. Some may be not realistic. I remember seeing a very interesting quote that the United Nations was created not to create heaven, but to prevent us from slipping into hell. And I actually think that that's probably something people need to remember, that both the AU and the UN are driven by member states. In other words, they can only be as functional and as forceful as their member states allow them to be. Have there been conflicts in Africa where the UN and the AU have not been as effective? Absolutely. But there's also the argument that were they not there, would we not have seen more Rwandas? Would we not have seen more Sudans? Would we not have had more Somalias? And so, one could come down on either side of the argument.
Let's talk a little bit about European colonialism. David Lamb, who covered the continent for the LA Times, wrote a great book, and in it he had a lot of vignettes. One of them was about how he had hired somebody to do the yard work, and then he hired somebody to do the inside work, cooking the food for him, and they didn't meet, and then finally they did meet, and he realized that they hated each other and they hated him, and he didn't quite get why, and he went and asked somebody, and they said, well, did you ask what tribes these people are from? And it kind of cast things, and the reason he wrote the story is that there's a Western perspective on all of this. We look at Angola, we look at Ghana, we look at Uganda, but perhaps the people who live on the continent don't see it the same way.
Well, I think it's important to remember that most of these African countries have only become independent in the late 1960s, beginning with Ghana in 1957. And so the consolidation of a national identity is very new. It's still happening. And there are indeed ongoing intrinsic loyalties to one's neighborhood and one's group, so to speak, which probably never actually go away completely, but with the right kind of government and the right kind of inclusion can be ameliorated.
One final question. The World Policy Institute estimates that $1.5 billion worth of weapons have been funneled into Africa by the United States. I see you nodding your head. This is not new to you. China, for its part, has been accused of ignoring human rights while doing business on the continent. Should more be done by the international community? And we see a lot of the negatives. What do you see from a positive standpoint coming from the continent?
Well, we have a very important opportunity with the UN adoption of an arms trade treaty. That happened last year in April. And both the major powers as well as the General Assembly members all need to move very quickly to ratify and get this treaty, which would halt or slow down the transfer of weapons, conventional arms or small and weapons, from being sent to places where they could be used in the abuse of human rights or commit mass atrocities. And that's what's really been a major driver of conflict in Africa. If we can actually get all of the African countries to sign and to ratify, and if we can finally get the United States as a role model for the rest of the permanent members of the Security Council, then I think we really do have a chance to cut down on the flow of weapons, which is, I think at one point we were estimating that it was killing about 1,500 people each year, which is staggering over the period of time, and that's just beyond, not counting the damage to development, the damage to infrastructure, which is a terrible challenge for Africa.
Yeah, it's hard to take a step forward when you're dealing with that. Adotei Akwei, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.